Hi everyone, welcome to Last Book Alive. Today I'm talking about Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Uh, Kazuo Ishiguro is a Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature. And this book, Klara and the Sun, is his eighth book. I think one of the most famous books that he's published is Remains of the Day, which was turned into a film. Um, but yeah, so this book actually was published in 2021, and he actually said that he wrote it before the pandemic. Um, so the book basically is narrated in the first person, from the perspective of this robot called Klara. Klara is a what's called an assistive friend, and what that means is that these robots have been manufactured to keep company to give company to children, and this is in the near to distant, like it's not so distant future, where basically society is now stratified, and people can actually opt for their children to be genetically edited, which means to get rid of any flaws that they may have, to make them basically superior. And this is obviously something that is only available to rich people, and because of that, children actually don't socialize as much, and so therefore there's this new line of robots that are manufactured to keep these children company, and to give them support. So Klara is one such robot, and the book is actually narrated from her perspective. So just something that I read about this book, Ishiguro, in an interview with The Guardian, he said actually that this book was meant to be a children's book, and it was a story that he narrated to his daughter, and it was going to be his first children's story. But when he narrated it to his daughter Naomi, she said that children will be traumatized by the story. So then he basically turned it into a novel, for us grown-ups. Um, okay, so basically I want to start with actually the cover of this book. The covers are really interesting. This is the cover. So and then when you open it, there's the sun. So this is actually, as you read the novel, you will understand that this square is actually how Klara sees the world. Okay, so because so she sees the world in like these kind of squares that appear, and then they form an image. So if it's my face, it will be divided into different squares in Klara's vision. So the fact that the book is kind of it basically, this is like we are looking at the sun. This is the sun, from Klara's perspective. Why is this book called Klara and the Sun? So Klara is a robot, but why the sun? Well, the sun is actually the sun, and these robots actually get their nourishment. They get recharged by their solar power, basically. So they get the nourishment from the sun, and the sun to them is like this god, right? Because the sun gives them life. And it features throughout the novel, and it is actually um, the sun is actually the thing that Klara looks up to and seeks help from, to help her friend, the person whose assistive friend she is, Josie, at the end. I hope it's assistive friend. I'm gonna just check that in a bit. So yeah. So what happens is that Klara is bought by Josie and her mom. So Josie is one of those gifted children. They're actually called uplifted children. But the flip side of genetic editing is that it also can lead to death in kids, and it can also lead to lifelong illness. So Josie suffers from this kind of illness, where like, yeah, she gets really tired, she gets really sick, she's unable to get out of bed. So she needs, so Klara offers, basically she's her comfort, and basically helps her, cope with loneliness and depression and things like that. So yeah, the summary of this book at the back, it says that in Klara and the Sun, Kazuo Ishiguro looks at our rapidly changing world through the eyes of an unforgettable narrator to explore a fundamental question. what does it mean to love? So I didn't actually think that that was the fundamental question that the book explored. In fact, I thought that the fundamental question was, what is the meaning of friendship? And also, also, I think perhaps more than that, it is an exploration of loneliness. So it explores friendship through Klara and Josie's friendship, and Klara basically sacrificing a lot for Josie's health and well-being, and Josie being constantly on her mind. But there is also the idea of loneliness, and maybe I actually wrote that it's kind of like an implicit exploration. Maybe it's not there on the surface when we read it, but when we think about Klara and her situation, maybe it's more like, maybe then we come to realize as the novel progresses and when it ends, yeah, the idea of loneliness, whether we are all in fact alone, and how bonds that seemingly are everlasting are never really quite so. Um, so yeah, so throughout the book, Klara is always trying to figure out what Josie wants. And when Josie gets really sick, things change for Klara. So she becomes her caretaker. And in that role, she notices that Josie is really close to this person called Rick. Rick is Josie's friend, but he's also poor, so he's not uplifted as Josie is. And Klara tries to clear up misunderstandings between Josie and Rick. But at the same time, there's this plot twist, and we find out that while Klara is Josie's caretaker, she is also kind of being planned as Josie's replacement. Okay, so what do I mean by that? What does Ishiguro mean by that? So in this future, this robot, Klara, is also learning to be Josie, learning her mannerisms, so that if and when Josie passes on, as her family suspects, Klara will be able to retain Josie's essence. What makes Josie Josie, Klara will be able to retain that. And to that effort, her mother, Josie's mother, has hired an artist to, so to speak, paint Josie, but actually to use Klara to slowly take on the characteristics of Josie. Towards the end of the novel, we see that it's not needed, but this is an interesting. It's an interesting concept, and it's an interesting concept, and the way that Ishiguro explores it is also interesting, because it is science fiction, but the way that he does it is that he brings it down to the human emotions, or maybe not even human emotions, because Klara is not human, but maybe just the idea of a being and an existence, and exploring these three themes through the experience of Klara and through Josie as well. So I appreciated that it's rooted in that, it's rooted in a human or human-like experience, and science fiction is natural part. It's like a very natural part of the narrative, Not that I'm not saying that I don't like books that are very overtly like, yeah, this is science fiction, this is a dystopian world, but this is a very interesting way of writing about it, I think. So yeah, and I also found it interesting that when Klara actually finds out that she's meant to replace Josie, there's actually no sense in her of like, oh my god, I'm betraying the person whom I'm supposed to be looking after, because it is in a way a little bit of a betrayal. That they are kind of preparing for Josie's death and trying to keep her alive, even as she is alive. So this is what Klara says when she finds out about their plans to keep Josie alive through her. "The heart you speak of," I said. "It might indeed be the hardest part of Josie to learn. It might be like a house with many rooms. Even so, a devoted AF, given time, could walk through each of those rooms, studying them carefully in turn until they became like her own home." So, yeah, so she has no problems with this idea, and she actually she's completely on board with it. Also, just to clarify, it's not assistive friend, it's artificial friend. AF, Klara's an AF, she's an artificial friend. So just one second. But Josie does get better, and Clara doesn't need to replace her or to continue her by this thing capturing her essence. This was just the about the book. So what are my views on it? So as I said, it's a quiet book. It's not one that hits you in the face. It builds slowly. Um, it's a book that I remember fondly. I remember the characters fondly. I definitely remember the innocence of Klara, but also her cutthroat logic. I remember Josie because she was written really well. She was written as a child who's impetuous, but also very intelligent, and and somebody who, despite the fact that she's a bit of a brat, we do feel empathy for her. And then obviously the strangeness and coldness of the mother. But again, then we also see the side of her, like where she's also vulnerable because she's afraid of losing her child. Um, at the same time, I didn't feel when I put down the book. I was like, that was a nice book, but I didn't feel like too deeply about it. And it's not because it's a superficial book. It's because maybe I feel like the themes that were engaged with were not dealt with too deeply, and there was not really like an extremity of like extreme emotions. Like there were no extreme emotions. The book didn't sway back and forth. It was it stayed on its course in a way. The characters stayed on course. There was not a very dramatic kind of shift in any of the characters or the storyline. Um, so I think maybe that's why it stayed with me, but maybe not that long. Um, and honestly, I felt like it was a little bit flat. The book was a little flat. Uh, it was very well organized, it was very well constructed. At the same time, it didn't spill out. Like it was like, yeah, the writer planned an outline. This is the book that I'm gonna write, and this is how the characters are gonna be. This is how the story is gonna go, and that is the trajectory of the story. Like it doesn't change course. It doesn't give us any huge surprises, and there's no like alteration or something, or like no like deep questions asked about human nature or whatever. They are asked, but for me it wasn't too deep. Like okay, so like if I compare it, like, and I know people say don't compare books or whatever, but I compare all the time. But like Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. Oh my god, characters are spilling out all over the place. We don't know what's going on, but it's a book that stayed with me, and it will always stay with me. So this is not one of those books. So I would say read it. Nowadays we're talking a lot about AI and artificial intelligence, and even Ishiguro talks a lot about it and its impact and all that. But I didn't think it was too deeply engaged with. I would say it's a nice and pleasant book. I would say that the character of Klara is actually very interesting. To narrate a story from the perspective of a robot, and that too in first person, and to make the robot-like but also human, that's a huge challenge, I think. So I think that's my take on the book. If you've read Klara and the Sun, let me know what you think. And if you read any of other Ishiguro's novels, let me know also what you think about his writing style. I'd really like to know your views on this. So take care, you all. Have a great Saturday and a good rest of the week. Bye.